Severe deformities, limited minds, and isolated lives marked whole generations. The most degenerate families, twisted by incest and cruel diseases transmitted through generations of closed blood. For decades, a dark reality remained hidden in the bowels of rural America. Practically forgotten by the rest of the world, a community lived in the remote mountains of the Appalachia region, specifically in the far west of Virginia. It was in 1937 when the Great Depression still punished the country, and mountainous regions like this one remained isolated not just geographically, but also culturally and socially. Around 1850, the Callaway family settled in this region when Jeremiah Callaway, a farmer from Pennsylvania, acquired cheap and unexplored lands. Over the decades, the family grew, but their contact with the outside world decreased dramatically. The lack of suitable roads, combined with a natural distrust of outsiders, turned the Callaways into a virtually self-sufficient community. This family's first significant contact with the outside world occurred in 1937 when a rural doctor named Dr. Elliot Montgomery, who ran isolated communities offering basic care, came across a disturbing reality. "I will never forget what I saw that day," reported Dr. Montgomery in his medical diary, later donated to the University of Richmond. Children with obvious malformations, adults with distinctly similar facial characteristics, and an alarming prevalence of cognitive deficiencies. Rediscovered only in 1973, Dr. Montgomery's records revealed that among the approximately 42 Callaway family members inhabiting that mountainous region, at least 23 showed visible signs of genetic problems. Among the documented conditions were extra fingers, polydactyly, abnormal skull development, severe strabismus, and varying degrees of intellectual impairment. The doctor noticed something even more disturbing: the family tree. As he was able to rebuild it through conversations with the most articulate clan members, he found that marriages between first-degree cousins were common, and there were even cases of unions between uncle and niece, as well as half-siblings who formed couples. This was not just a geographically isolated family. It was a lineage that for generations had closed in on itself, intensifying harmful recessive genes. Of the most striking images described by Dr. Montgomery was that of 3 Callaway children aged 6 to 12 who had remarkably similar faces, prominent teeth, very close-set eyes, underdeveloped chins, and the same empty expression. In his medical description, he noted that it seemed the same face had been printed 3 times, each with small variations of the same underlying condition. The family patriarch at that time, Obadiah Callaway, a 67-year-old man who surprisingly had no obvious physical deformities, explained to the doctor, "We take care of our own. The outside world doesn't understand our customs. Here, we keep our blood pure." Check to see if you are already subscribed to this channel. What you are about to find out goes beyond the imaginable, revealing family secrets that society has tried to hide for decades. Do not miss any details of these forbidden stories that will change your vision of human nature. In 1952, 15 years after Drive Montgomery's initial meeting with the Callaways, another health professional turned his attention to this family. Dr. Harold Winters, a geneticist at the University of Virginia, had found Montgomery's diaries and decided to investigate this unique case of genetic isolation. A small team was organized by Winters that included an anthropologist, a nurse, and a photographer. With the reluctant permission of Josiah Callaway, who had taken the family leadership after Obadiah's death, the team spent 2 weeks documenting the community's conditions. The produced report, entitled "Genetic Isolation in the Appalachia, a Case Study," became a significant scientific document, although it remained restricted to specific academic circles for decades due to its sensitive content. Dr. Winters documented that the 3rd and 4th generations of Callaways had alarming rates of congenital problems. Among the 16 children born between 1940 and 1952, 9 had severe cognitive deficiencies, 7 had visible physical deformities, and 5 did not survive beyond their early years. "We are witnessing the devastating effects of homozygosity of harmful recessive genes," Winters wrote in his report. When close individuals have children, the probability that both carry the same recessive deleterious gene increases dramatically. The result is the concentration of genetic traits that in diverse populations would remain rare and diluted. One of the most iconic cases documented was that of Eliza Callaway, a 16-year-old born with a condition known as syndactyly, the congenital fusion of the fingers. In Eliza's case, all fingers on both hands were fused, creating a mitten-like appearance. Additionally, she had a severe curvature of the spine and limited verbal capacity. Most disturbing was Eliza's family history. Her father, Malachi Calloway, was also her uncle, her mother Rebecca's brother. This particularly close union resulted in an extreme concentration of problematic recessive genes. Dr. Winters recorded in his notes, Rebecca confessed to me that her other 3 children, all born with even more severe deformities, did not survive childhood. She attributes these deaths to divine will, but the real cause is undoubtedly genetic. The research also revealed that the family had developed its own explanations for the conditions afflicting many of its members. They did not attribute the deformities and deficiencies to close kinship, but to a mixture of local superstitions and peculiar religious interpretations. Jebediah Calloway, one of the family's elders, explained to the team's anthropologist, when a pregnant woman is frightened by a wild animal, the child can be born marked. This is how it has worked since ancient times. This denial of the true cause allowed intrafamily marriage patterns to continue for generations, perpetuating the cycle of genetic problems. While Dr. Winters documented the scientific aspect, the team's anthropologist, Dr. Raymond Parker, focused on the social context that allowed such genetic isolation to persist for so long. The Calloway isolation is not only physical but also ideological, Parker wrote. They developed a system of beliefs that values family blood above all, seeing any external marriage as an unwanted dilution of their lineage. In 1967, when the winds of social change blew throughout America, life in the Calloway community remained virtually unchanged since the previous century. It was this year that a young, newly graduated, and idealistic social worker named Martha Jenkins was assigned to evaluate the conditions of isolated families in the Appalachians as part of a federal program to combat rural poverty. Jenkins meticulously documented her observations in official reports and in her personal diary, providing a rare glimpse into the daily life of this family marked by consanguinity. "The first thing that impressed me was the silence," wrote Jenkins. "For a community with so many children, there was a remarkable absence of laughs and games. Many of the children would simply sit, staring at nothing, or repeating monotonous movements with their hands." The social worker documented the family's daily routine, which revolved around basic subsistence tasks, maintaining gardens, breeding some animals, collecting wood, and maintaining their precarious dwellings. Most remarkable was how tasks were distributed according to the limited abilities of many family members. Ezekiel Calloway, a 40-year-old man with severe cognitive impairment, spends his days carrying stream water to the homes. It is the only task he can accomplish consistently, and the family has developed a system of sounds and simple gestures to communicate with him, reported Jenkins. Social life within the community was structured around rigid family hierarchies. The patriarch at that time, Josiah Calloway, then 72, made all significant decisions, from marriage arrangements to internal disputes. His word was final and undeniable. One of the most disturbing aspects documented by Jenkins was the practice of promising children for future weddings, often between cousins or even uncles and nieces. She witnessed as Abigail, a 12-year-old girl, was already promised to her first cousin, Isaiah, 14. If you have watched this far, it is because you understand the importance of knowing our hidden history. Comment now, blood tells stories that words cannot express, and be part of this journey of discovering truths that society preferred to forget. Jenkins described in detail the condition of Ruth Calloway, a 32-year-old woman who was the mother of 5, all conceived with her first cousin Jeremiah. Ruth had a distinctly asymmetrical face with one eye significantly lower than the other, and her movements were marked by involuntary spasms. 3 of her children had variations of the same condition in different degrees. "The most impressive thing is that for them, this is normal," wrote Jenkins. Ruth shows no awareness that her condition or that of her children is unusual. "When I tried to approach the subject delicately, she simply answered, 'We are all children of the Lord, made in His image.'" The social worker also registered the presence of what the family called the room of silence, a separate room in one of the main houses where family members with the most severe disabilities resided, some unable to walk or communicate. These individuals were cared for by older women in the family who fed them and carried out basic care. "The vision of that room will be forever recorded in my memory," wrote Jenkins. 6 people with ages ranging from 9 to 47 years old, all presenting severe deformities, lying on straw mattresses on the floor. The odor was almost unbearable, despite the obvious efforts to keep the place clean. The most disturbing thing was the silence. Even when I approached, only one of them reacted with a low moan. In her official report, Jenkins recommended immediate intervention by social services, especially for the children. However, judicial complexities and the family's fierce resistance prevented concrete action for several years. In 1978, the Callaway case gained new attention when Dr. Lawrence Richardson, a geneticist from the newly established Duke University Studies Center, got permission to conduct a comprehensive family study. With advances in human genetics during the 1970s, Richardson saw in the Callaways an unprecedented opportunity to study the prolonged effects of consanguinity on an isolated population. With a more sensitive and respectful approach than his predecessors, Richardson gained the cooperation of several family members, especially after offering free medical care as part of the study. The results were revealing and scientifically significant. Through detailed analysis of medical, phenotypic, and historical characteristics, Richardson mapped 5 specific genetic conditions that had become predominant in the family. Modified Waardenburg syndrome, a rare condition characterized by partial discoloration of hair, eyes of different colors, and deafness in some cases. In the Callaway family, this condition had combined with other genetic traits, creating a unique and more severe variant. Crouzon syndrome, a genetic disorder causing premature fusion of cranial sutures, resulting in abnormal development of the skull and facial characteristics. Richardson documented that this condition affected about 35% of the Callaways. Polydactyly, the presence of extra fingers on the hands or feet, affecting approximately 28% of the family. Hereditary intellectual deficiency, ranging from mild to severe, present in almost 60% of family members to some degree. A rare form of skeletal dysplasia causing abnormal body proportions and mobility problems in approximately 15% of the family. What we observed in the Callaways is an extremely rare convergence of multiple recessive genetic conditions, Richardson wrote in his report published in the Journal of Medical Genetics in 1979. In a genetically diverse population, each of these conditions would occur at very low frequencies. However, due to generations of consanguineous marriages, we see these conditions not only at high frequencies but also in combinations that have rarely or never been documented in medical literature. One of the most studied cases by Richardson was Isaiah Callaway, a 34-year-old man who had a combination of Waardenburg and Crouzon syndromes. Isaiah had a distinctly unusual facial appearance, widely spaced eyes of different colors, one blue and one brown, an excessively prominent forehead, and an underdeveloped jaw. Despite these extreme physical characteristics, Isaiah had relatively preserved cognition and served as a kind of unofficial family historian. Isaiah told me stories dating back 5 generations, reported Richardson. He described how his ancestors deliberately avoided external marriages because they believed that the blood of the Callaways was special and chosen by God. This belief, passed down through generations, served as a religious justification for practices that resulted in genetic devastation. Richardson's study also revealed something surprising. Despite the obvious genetic problems, the Callaway family had developed remarkable resilience. They created mutual care systems that allowed even the most compromised members to play a role in the community. There is a complex social structure that has developed over the generations, said Richardson. Individuals with relatively preserved cognitive abilities assume responsibility for those most severely affected, in a system of interdependence that, although problematic in many ways, demonstrates a notable social adaptation to their genetic circumstances. Richardson's work first brought the Callaway case to the wider medical community's knowledge, albeit discreetly, and especially in specialized academic publications. The year 1983 marked the beginning of the end for the Callaways' isolation. A combination of factors, including the construction of new roads in the region, the growing presence of rural social services, and an investigative report published in the Charleston Gazette, finally brought public attention to the family's situation. The report, entitled "The Forgotten of the Mountains," included photographs with blurred faces of some family members and detailed the conditions in which they lived. The public response was immediate and forceful, with appeals for state intervention. In March 1983, a multidisciplinary team composed of social workers, health professionals, and representatives of Virginia's Department of Human Services arrived at the Callaway property. What they found was a declining community. The number of members had decreased to approximately 30 people, with a drastically reduced birth rate in the latest generation. Jebediah Callaway, who had taken leadership after Josiah's death in 1979, initially resisted the external intervention but eventually gave in when the officers explained they had no intention of separating the family, only providing medical and educational assistance. It was as if a door to another world had been opened, reported Catherine Williams, the social worker who led the team. Many of the younger Callaways, especially those with less cognitive impairment, showed a huge curiosity about the world beyond their mountains. In the following months, several initiatives were implemented. Comprehensive medical examinations were performed on all family members. School-aged children were gradually introduced to the educational system with specialized support. Adults with treatable conditions received medical attention, in many cases for the first time in their lives. One of the most striking stories of this period was that of Mary Callaway, a 17-year-old who, despite presenting the family's typical facial characteristics, had above-average intelligence. After receiving glasses to correct her severe myopia and being introduced to educational materials, Mary demonstrated an extraordinary capacity for mathematics and an insatiable thirst for knowledge. In September 1984, Mary became the first Callaway to leave the mountains to study, enrolling in a special program at Rowan Oaks Community College. Her adaptation to the outside world was documented in a short article in the local newspaper where she stated, "I feel like I was born again. There is so much to learn, so much to see." For the older and more severely affected Callaways, the transition was more difficult. Many resisted changes, and some never completely adapted to the increased contact with the outside world. One of the most significant aspects of the intervention was the genetic counseling offered to the family. For the first time, they received clear explanations of how consanguineous marriages had contributed to the health problems they faced. For many, this revelation was deeply disturbing and challenged fundamental beliefs transmitted for generations. Hannah Callaway, a 42-year-old woman who had given birth to 5 children with her first cousin, only 2 survived beyond childhood, expressed her anguish in an interview recorded for the project archives. "If we had known, if anyone had told us. We thought we were doing God's will by keeping our blood pure." In 1989, 6 years after the initial intervention, a follow-up assessment revealed profound changes in the Callaway community. The original property now housed only 18 family members, especially the elders and those with conditions that made integration into wider society difficult. Younger members of the family had dispersed, some studying, others working in nearby cities. Most significantly, there were no new cases of consanguineous marriage, and the few children born during this period were the result of unions with people from outside the family. Dr. Richardson, who continued to accompany the family over these years, published a final article on the Callaways in 1991 entitled "Interruption of a Consanguineous Cycle, Social Interventions and Genetic Outcomes." In it, he noted, "The case of the Callaways represents both a human tragedy and an opportunity for learning. Generations of isolation and intrafamily marriages created a microcosm of genetic pathologies that we will probably not see again on this scale. More important, however, is the fact that this cycle was finally interrupted, offering future generations a chance to escape the genetic destiny that imprisoned their ancestors." Medical records, genetic studies, and social documentation related to the Callaways have been preserved with protected identities in academic archives, serving as an important case study for geneticists, anthropologists, and public health professionals. They remain a dark testimony to the consequences of extreme isolation and prolonged consanguinity. If you watched this far, it is because you liked this story. Leave a comment saying, "I watched here," so I can meet you and know who really likes the stories here on the channel. And don't forget to subscribe right now to receive more impactful stories like this. Real stories that reveal the darkest secrets and the most tragic destinies of families marked by consanguinity through generations. Leave your like and share this video with someone you know would be fascinated by these disturbing revelations about the human condition.